Cameras rolled as Trump lost his temper and demanded Obama leave the stage, yet in that instant Obama didn't flinch. He delivered a line that flipped the entire room against Trump. The room was dressed for history, chandeliers glared down on polished marble floors, cameras lined the walls like watchful eyes, and every seat in the East Room of the White House was taken. Senators, governors, ambassadors, and journalists all pressed in close, not just to hear speeches about bipartisan cooperation, but to witness a moment where two living presidents, one current and one former, would stand under the same roof. The tension was hard to ignore. You could feel it in the way people leaned forward, whispering in low tones before quickly going quiet again. Washington had seen its share of political theater, but this night already felt different. Former President Barack Obama, dressed in a dark suit with his familiar composed expression, was set to speak after dinner, while at the head table President Donald Trump sat rigid, flanked by aides who were visibly on edge. The cameras never left him. Everyone in that room knew that when Trump and Obama shared the same stage, sparks were almost guaranteed. But here's the part no one expected. The evening would descend into one of the most shocking public clashes ever seen inside those historic walls. The event had been announced weeks earlier as an effort to highlight unity. Invitations were sent to leaders from both parties with the promise of speeches about cooperation and the strength of America's democratic institutions. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. A White House aide was overheard in the hallway, muttering that calling the event unity night was like inviting fire and water to dinner and hoping for a handshake. At first things looked calm. The dinner went smoothly, filled with light conversation about policy, international partnerships, and even football. Cameras occasionally panned the tables, catching laughter, clinking glasses, and flashes of smiles that seemed rehearsed, yet underneath people were restless. Reporters typed furiously, glancing back and forth between Trump and Obama, waiting for the moment one of them would make news, and that moment came faster than anyone imagined. When Obama finally stood up, the atmosphere shifted. Some guests clapped warmly, others hesitated, their eyes darting toward Trump. The former president began speaking in his trademark rhythm, measured, deliberate, carrying weight without force. He talked about the resilience of American institutions, the need to put country before party, and the responsibility leaders have to temper personal pride for the sake of national stability. His voice echoed softly through the East Room microphones, steady and confident. "History will not measure us by how loudly we speak," Obama said, glancing around the room, "but by whether we listened, by whether we chose courage over chaos, unity over division." A few heads nodded in approval, a few others tightened their lips, clearly uneasy, but everyone felt the same thing. Obama wasn't just giving a speech, he was making a point, and everyone knew who the point was aimed at. Trump shifted in his chair, his fingers drummed on the table, his eyes narrowing. Aides near him exchanged worried looks. Obama continued, his words calm but undeniably sharp. "This nation is bigger than one man's pride. It is stronger than any one personality, and it will endure so long as we remember that truth." The air in the room grew heavier. Even seasoned politicians leaned forward, unsure of how Trump would react. The cameras zoomed in, sensing the storm brewing, and then it happened. Trump abruptly stood up. His chair screeched against the marble, the sound slicing through the quiet like a blade. He pointed directly at Obama, his voice rising above the silence. "Get out." The words slammed into the room, raw and unfiltered. Gasps erupted. Journalists jolted upright, scrambling to record every second. Several senators froze mid-bite. A diplomatic guest from Europe whispered to the person next to him, "Did he really just say that?" Obama stood still, not moving an inch. He didn't flinch, didn't break eye contact. His silence stretched over the chaos, commanding the room without a word. For a moment it felt as though time itself had slowed down, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. Trump's aides rushed toward him, whispering frantically. Staff members tried to calm the shock rippling through the guests, but it was too late. The words had been said and the cameras had captured it all. The East Room, a place that had hosted decades of history, now carried a tension that could be cut with a knife. What had started as a night for unity had turned into something very different, something no one could look away from. But the real story hadn't even started yet. because Obama's reply would soon turn that tense silence into one of the most unforgettable moments in modern politics. The room was still buzzing from Trump's outburst. Reporters whispered furiously. Aides shuffled nervously, and several guests avoided eye contact altogether. It wasn't just the shock of a sitting president yelling, "Get out," at a former president. It was the rawness of it, the kind of political theater you could never rehearse, the kind that burned itself instantly into the memory of anyone who witnessed it. Obama, however, didn't move. His hands rested lightly on the podium, his posture relaxed, his face calm. For a man who had faced hecklers, critics, and crises on the world stage, this was just another moment, only magnified by the weight of where it was happening and who it was against. Instead of raising his voice, Obama leaned closer to the microphone, his tone steady, measured, almost gentle. "Mr. President," he began, his eyes never leaving Trump, "with all due respect, this room doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the American people." The silence that followed was crushing, every ear straining to hear his next words. A cameraman in the back actually lowered his equipment for a split second, stunned by the sharpness of the reply. Obama continued, "I was invited here just as you were to speak on unity, and if unity makes you this uncomfortable, maybe it says more about where we are as a country than anything I could ever say tonight." The line cut through the tension like glass breaking. Murmurs erupted at the tables. A senator from Arizona shook her head slowly, mouthing the word, "Wow." A group of college students who had been invited to witness the event whispered excitedly, their phones already lit up recording. Trump bristled, his lips pressed into a hard line. He gestured to one of his aides, clearly signaling for the microphone to be cut, but the staff hesitated. No one wanted to be the one responsible for silencing a former president on live television. Obama glanced briefly at the crowd, then returned his focus to Trump. "You can ask me to leave," he said, his voice calm but firm, "but you can't erase what needs to be heard." The East Room erupted with applause, not polite applause, real thunderous clapping, some guests even standing in their seats. The sound echoed so loudly that it almost drowned out the chaos of aides frantically pacing near the walls. Obama raised a hand, slightly asking for calm. His composure only magnified the weight of his words. "This isn't about me and it isn't about you," he said, his tone softening. "It's about every American family watching tonight. Families who are tired of leaders treating politics like a grudge match, families who don't care about insults and power plays. They care about whether their kids can grow up safe, whether their parents can afford health care, whether their voices mean something." Trump shifted again, clearly furious, but the applause kept building. Emboldened by the moment, Obama leaned in and said, "The truth, Mr. President, is that history won't remember how loudly we shouted each other down. It will remember whether we stood up when it mattered, whether we chose dignity or chaos, whether we built something lasting or left behind nothing but bitterness." The crowd grew quiet again. Not out of fear, but out of respect. The words were landing one after another, steady as a drumbeat. Trump finally raised his voice again, accusing, "You're here to embarrass me, that's all this is." Obama didn't blink and replied, "I'm here to remind you that the presidency is bigger than one man's pride. Bigger than my pride, bigger than yours, and the minute we forget that, we all lose." The room was electric. Even those who didn't agree with Obama politically couldn't deny the force of his delivery. He hadn't shouted, hadn't insulted, hadn't resorted to theatrics. He had simply spoken, and the words carried all the weight they needed. Cameras zoomed in tight on his face, capturing the calm expression, the unshakable tone, while social media platforms were already lighting up with clips and hashtags forming in real time. Millions at home weren't just watching, they were reacting. But inside the room, the energy shifted. Guests leaned closer, hanging on every word. Staff members stopped moving. Even Trump's own aides looked torn, unsure whether to intervene or let the confrontation play out. Obama adjusted the microphone slightly and said, "You can shout all you want, but leadership isn't measured by volume, it's measured by character." Another wave of applause rolled through the East Room. Some people stood again, others clapped harder, but the sound was impossible to ignore. Trump's face reddened, his jaw tight. He tried to speak again, but the applause drowned him out. Obama weighted his hands, still resting lightly on the podium, until the sound faded enough for him to close this part of his address. "My message tonight is simple. We don't heal this country by tearing each other down, we heal it by remembering that we all serve something greater than ourselves. The words echoed, lingering in the room like a challenge no one could easily dismiss, but as powerful. As that moment it was only the beginning, because Obama's final comeback would soon shake not just that room, but the entire nation watching from home. The applause had barely died down when Trump lunged forward, gripping the edge of his table, as if steadying himself for a fight. His face was flushed, his eyes darting between the cameras and Obama. For someone who lived on spectacle, the idea of being overshadowed in his own White House was intolerable. You think you're some kind of saint, don't you? Trump bellowed, his voice cracking through the East Room. Like thunder, you come in here into my house and act like you've got the answers to everything. Let me tell you something. I'm the president, not you, not anymore me. The words bounced off the walls, colliding with the stunned silence of the audience. Gasps rippled through the tables. A woman from the Department of State pressed her hands over her mouth, while a pair of journalists from the Boston Globe exchanged wide-eyed looks before scribbling notes so fast their pens nearly tore the paper. Obama didn't respond right away. He simply watched, calm as stone, letting the outburst settle. His stillness contrasted so sharply with Trump's raw anger that it only heightened the tension. Trump jabbed a finger toward him, shouting, "You had your time 8 years, and what did we get? A mess. Now you waltz back in here like you're some kind of savior. Get out." "I said get out," he repeated louder, practically shouting over his own echo. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Senators from both sides fidgeted in their seats. A guest from Dallas muttered, "This is madness." Cameras zoomed in, capturing Trump's hand trembling as he gestured furiously while capturing Obama's calm expression and the clash of two legacies in real time. Obama finally spoke, his tone quiet, deliberate. "Mr. President, the White House doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the American people, and they deserve better than this display that only seemed to enrage Trump further. He turned to the audience, throwing his arms wide, shouting, "See this? See what he's doing? He's trying to humiliate me on national television. It's disgraceful." From the corner, a senator from New Mexico stood halfway, then sat back down, unsure whether to intervene. No one wanted to be the first to step into this collision of egos. Trump slammed his hand on the table, yelling, "Security, security, where are you? I want him out of here." But the Secret Service agents positioned near the doors didn't move. They exchanged careful glances, then stayed put, because removing a former president on live television wasn't just risky, it was unthinkable. The crowd could feel it. Trump had lost control, not just of the room, but of the very image he so carefully tried to command. His authority, once absolute within those walls, was now cracking in front of millions. Obama didn't flinch. He leaned into the microphone and said, "I'm not here to humiliate anyone. I'm here because the people who invited me believe this country deserves a conversation about unity, about dignity, about leadership. If that makes you uncomfortable, then maybe the question isn't about me being here. Maybe it's about why you feel so threatened by the idea of unity." The line cut sharp and clean. A collective gasp swept through the room, followed quickly by a ripple of applause that grew louder until it drowned out Trump's protest. "Sit down," Trump roared, but his voice cracked against the tide of clapping hands. Obama straightened, waiting calmly for the room to quiet again. His face betrayed nothing but composure, while Trump fumed, pacing slightly behind his table, muttering to aides who had no idea what to do. The cameras captured everything. The President of the United States, red-faced and furious, and the former President, steady and unshaken, delivering words that carried the weight of reason. "Respect isn't demanded," Obama said, his tone like steel wrapped in velvet. "It's earned, and right now the American people are watching to see who among us understands that truth." The applause came again, stronger, as if the audience itself had chosen a side in real time. Trump shouted over it, "This is my presidency, my event. I won't be lectured by you in front of the world." Obama tilted his head slightly, not in mockery, but in something closer to pity, and said, "Your presidency, Mr. President, belongs to the people, not to you. That's the first thing every leader should understand." The audience stirred again, whispers weaving through the rows of chairs. Even those who had come expecting a stiff ceremonial dinner now realized they were part of a moment that would be replayed for decades. The clash wasn't just about two men, it was about two visions of leadership colliding under the same roof, one fueled by anger and spectacle, the other by calm defiance and words that seemed designed to echo long after the microphones were turned off. Trump slammed The table once more yelling, I said, "Get out," but this time the demand didn't land with force. It sounded hollow, almost desperate, swallowed by the silence that followed. And then, almost on cue, a voice from the crowd broke the tension it came from. A governor seated near the back let him speak. It was soft at first, but then others picked it up. "Let him speak." A senator murmured, "Let him speak." Another echoed. Soon half the room was chanting at their words, layering together until it became impossible to ignore. Trump froze, eyes darting around, stunned that his own event had slipped from his grip. Obama stood silently waiting, but what came next would transform the confrontation into something no one in that room or watching at home would ever forget. "Let him speak, let him speak," rippled through the East Room like a wave. At first, it was scattered, timid, just a handful of voices testing the boundaries. But then it swelled, gathering strength until the entire chamber seemed to pulse with its senators, governors, journalists, students, diplomats' voices rising together, in unison, drowning out Trump's attempts to shout over them. Trump slammed his palm against the table again, red-faced, barking, "This is my house, mine." But his words were buried beneath the noise. His own event had turned against him. The cameras caught every angle: Trump's fury, the crowd's defiance, Obama's composure. Obama remained at the podium, waiting patiently. He didn't gesture, didn't shout for silence. He simply stood steady as a mountain, letting the room find its voice. The image was stark: one man losing control while another gained it without even trying. When the chants finally died down, the silence that followed was deafening. It wasn't just silence, it was expectation. Every set of eyes in the room locked on Obama, waiting for what he would say next. Obama leaned closer to the microphone, his voice calm and unhurried, carried across the room. "We are standing in the people's house, not one man's stage, not one party's theater. This is the people's house, and the people deserve to be heard." The audience erupted again, clapping and cheering. But this time it wasn't wild or chaotic, it was steady, unified, deliberate. The applause rolled like thunder, echoing through the chandeliers and spilling into the hallways beyond. Trump waved his arms, his voice breaking. "Fake news! They'll spin this! They'll make it look like I lost control!" From the back of the room, a journalist shouted, "Mr. President, they don't have to spin anything, the cameras are live." The crowd laughed, not cruelly but sharply, the way people laugh when someone points out the obvious truth. Trump's face flushed deeper, the laughter slicing at him more painfully than any insult. Obama took advantage of the pause. "No one came here tonight to watch two men shout each other down. They came here because they believe this country is capable of more. They believe we can sit at the same table even when we disagree and find a way forward." He gestured lightly toward Trump's table. "I'll say this again, leadership is not about volume, it's about vision. You can command a room with anger, or you can guide it with dignity. The choice is yours, but one choice lasts longer than the other." The words landed heavy, resonating not just in the East Room, but with the millions watching at home. Social media was already ablaze, hashtags trending, memes forming, live streams dissecting each sentence in real time. On Twitter, one user typed, "Obama just turned Trump's house into his classroom." Trump clenched his fists, pacing behind his chair. "This is a setup, a total setup. You're all against me," he barked, pointing toward the journalists. But the crowd wasn't on his side anymore. Guests who would normally avoid any public display of disloyalty were now openly shaking their heads. Some looked down at their plates, embarrassed. Others exchanged knowing glances, the kind that said, silently, "This is history and we're watching it unfold." A senator from Wisconsin leaned toward his colleague and whispered loud enough for a nearby microphone to catch it. "I've never seen anything like this. He's unraveling." Obama didn't strike back. He didn't mock. He simply waited until the noise settled and spoke again, his voice steady as ever. "Anger is easy. Blame is easy. But when the anger fades, when the shouting ends, what will you have left? What will history remember? That you shouted the loudest, or that you chose to rise above it?" For a moment no one spoke. Even Trump fell into a strange silence, as though the weight of those words had lodged somewhere he couldn't shake. The camera zoomed in close Obama at the podium, his expression composed, his words carrying like a steady drumbeat. Trump, in contrast, sat stiff, lips pressed together, face flushed. The picture of a man cornered not by force but by his own loss of control. The energy in the room shifted again. People leaned in, captivated. Even those who had walked in skeptical of Obama found themselves drawn in. It wasn't about politics anymore. It was about two men, one wielding anger, the other wielding patience, and which one the country would remember. Then, from the press section, a reporter called out, "Mr. Obama, what do you say to those who believe unity is impossible under this administration?" Obama didn't hesitate. Unity is never impossible. It's only difficult, and difficult things are always worth fighting for. The room applauded again. Aides on both sides scrambled nervously, unsure how to handle the momentum of the night. Trump muttered angrily under his breath, but his voice was drowned in the applause. The confrontation was no longer just a clash of egos. It was becoming a defining moment, one that would ripple far beyond the White House walls. The East Room now resembled a courtroom. Every eye weighed the two men. Every breath felt suspended between Trump's bursts of rage and Obama's measured calm. The contrast was impossible to miss. Where Trump fumed, Obama seemed carved from stone, steady, deliberate, unshaken. For a moment, Obama let the silence breathe. He didn't rush to fill it. He knew silence could be louder than words if held long enough. Slowly, he glanced around the room, making eye contact with senators, governors, students, staffers, as if reminding them this isn't about two men, it's about all of you. Finally, he spoke. "The presidency is not a crown," Obama said, his voice low but cutting through the room like a blade. "It's a responsibility. And sometimes responsibility means hearing things you don't want to hear." Murmurs spread. Some guests nodded, others sat frozen, unwilling to risk being caught clapping on camera, but the energy had tilted. The room now leaned toward Obama. Trump slammed his fist on the table again. "You're not the president anymore, Barack. Nobody voted for you this time. Nobody wants to hear you preach." Obama didn't flinch. "And yet here I am," he replied, evenly. "Because Americans still believe in decency, still believe in dialogue, still believe in dignity." The crowd stirred again, a senator whispering, "That's going to be quoted forever." Trump's face darkened. "Don't lecture me about dignity. I built this country back up. You left it weak? You left it broken? Everyone knows it?" Obama shook his head lightly, almost pitying the desperation. "Mr. President, strength isn't measured by how loudly you pound the table. It's measured by whether you lift people up or tear them down. And right now, the country is watching. A president who confuses intimidation with leadership." The crowd gasped. Even a few Republican senators exchanged uneasy looks. Trump turned toward the audience seeking support. "You see, he's disrespecting the office, disrespecting me." From somewhere in the crowd, a voice shouted back, "Respect has to be earned." The room erupted with murmurs. Obama let the moment breathe again, then stepped closer to the microphone, his voice calm and deliberate but with steel beneath it. "I spent 8 years in this office. I know how heavy the burden can be. I know the sleepless nights, the crises, the loneliness of leadership. But I also know this: you cannot lead a nation if you are ruled by your temper. You cannot unite a country if every criticism feels like an attack. Leadership requires patience. It requires humility." The East Room was dead quiet now. You could hear the whirring of cameras, the scratching of pens across paper. Trump muttered angrily into the mic, "You think you're so perfect. You think you never made mistakes." Obama shook his head. "I made plenty. But the measure of a leader isn't whether he makes mistakes, it's whether he learns from them. And the measure of a nation isn't whether it has disagreements, it's whether it can rise above them." The words hung heavy in the air. People weren't just hearing a speech anymore. They were witnessing a moral lesson unfold in real time. Trump stood abruptly, knocking his chair back. "This is over," he shouted, gesturing for aides to clear the podium. "I won't let him humiliate me in my own house." But again, the Secret Service didn't move. They stood watchful but motionless. Removing a former president who had been invited would have been political suicide. Obama leaned into the mic one last time. With all due respect, Mr. President, the people watching tonight aren't judging me. They're judging you. And the question they'll ask themselves tomorrow isn't, what did Obama say? It will be, how did Trump react? The crowd gasped again. Trump froze, his face twitching with fury, but he didn't respond. For the first time all night his silence was louder than his words. Asterisk. Reporters typed furiously as hashtags lit up across social media. Every outlet knew instantly that the soundbite would dominate headlines. The people aren't judging me, they're judging you, Obama said before calmly taking a sip of water. He set the glass down gently and added, the presidency is temporary, character is permanent. Applause erupted. People rose to their feet, though not everyone clapped. Some folded their arms, unwilling to betray loyalty, but the sound was overwhelming. Trump's fists clenched, his eyes darting around the room searching for control that had already slipped away. Obama had seized the room, not with force or anger, but with quiet authority that spoke louder than any shout. The East Room was no longer Trump's stage, it was Obama's classroom. And America was listening. Asterisk outside those walls. The country itself was reacting in real time. The chandeliers glittered above as cameras hummed steadily, everyone sensing that something irreversible had just happened. Then came the moment that would echo across televisions, phones, and radios for days. Obama straightened, leaned toward the microphone, and said with calm precision, Mr. President, you can tell me to leave, but the truth is history will remember who told the truth and who tried to silence it. The words landed like a strike. For a full beat there was no sound, no cough, no shuffle of papers, not even the whir of a camera motor. The silence was louder than shouting. Trump's jaw tightened, but he didn't reply. For once he had no comeback. Asterisk, the room exploded. Applause roared like thunder. Guests surged to their feet, pounding tables and shouting encouragement. Obama. Let the tidal wave of approval wash over the room. Students at the far side raised their fists and recorded on their phones. A senator whispered, that line will be quoted for 50 years. Trump tried to cut in, waving his arms and yelling, fake. All fake. While pointing at journalists, but the crowd was gone from him. Obama hadn't just defended himself. He had turned the confrontation into a clash between dignity and rage, reason and reaction. His voice cut gently through the noise. This country deserves better than shouting matches. It deserves leaders who can disagree without trying to erase each other. Because the truth is, America isn't about one man or one party or one election, it's about the people. And the people are watching. Asterisk, that line struck hard. Guests glanced at cameras, suddenly aware millions of families were watching at home. Aides clustered nervously at the sides, unsure whether to intervene. Secret Service agents stood still, statuesque, unwilling to touch the powder keg. The applause rose and fell in waves, the crowd unable to get enough of what they had witnessed. A governor later said, you could feel the ground shift in that room. Everyone knew we were watching history. Trump slammed his fist against the table, shouting, this is a disgrace, a total disgrace. But it didn't matter. His fury was eclipsed. Obama looked directly into the cameras and said softly, don't let anger be louder than hope. Don't let fear shout down your voice. And never let anyone convince you that decency is weakness. Decency is strength. Asterisk, the line was instantly iconic. Anchors would recite it on primetime, late-night shows would replay it, and social media was already flooding with clips. The crowd roared again, applause echoing like cannon fire. Some Republicans sat quietly shaken, not politically converted perhaps, but unable to deny the force of the moment. Obama stood calm, hands folded, not smiling, not gloating, simply composed, letting the words speak for themselves. The contrast was complete. Trump's fury burned hot and brief, while Obama's steady words etched themselves into memory. One journalist scribbled in his notes, this wasn't a speech, this was a verdict. Trump muttered incoherently, pointing at the press, but no one cared. The cameras had their story. Asterisk, Obama returned to the microphone for one final line. I'll leave when I'm finished speaking. And when history looks back, it won't ask who shouted, it'll ask who stood with dignity. The applause was deafening. Beyond those walls, in newsrooms, diners, airports, and homes, the clash was already larger than either man. By the time Obama left the podium, reporters were typing furiously, live feeds were streaming, and breaking news alerts buzzed across phones nationwide. CNN's Chiron Reed, Trump shouts at Obama, "Get out," Obama's reply stuns room. Fox News scrambled with panel debates, some defending Trump, others conceding Obama's power. MSNBC replayed the clip endlessly, each time hitting harder, asterisk on Twitter. Hashtags like #Obama reply, #GetOutMoment, and #decency is strength trended instantly. A student's clip hit 5 million views before networks caught up. TikTok filled with edits contrasting Trump's shouting with Obama's calm. In Los Angeles, dorm rooms erupted in cheers. In Phoenix diners, truckers shook their heads at Trump's loss of control. In Boston, families who had voted differently for years sat in silence, each feeling the weight. Analysts compared the exchange to Nixon's Watergate confrontations. One said bluntly, "Obama didn't just win the room, he won the narrative." Asterisk Trump's allies scrambled. Some claimed Obama hijacked the event, others said he disrespected the office. But those takes drowned under the viral storm. Obama's line, "History will remember who told the truth and who tried to silence it," was everywhere. It was printed on shirts, posted on church billboards, painted on murals in Philadelphia. By morning, inside the White House, aides admitted defeat. "We've lost the night," one whispered. Trump raged in private, calling confidants and repeating fake, rigged, staged over and over. But there was no undoing what millions had already seen with their own eyes. Asterisk Obama didn't linger. He left the East Room with a simple wave, shaking hands calmly, his words already echoing far beyond the White House walls. Asterisk. Before stepping into the night outside, reporters swarmed shouting questions, but he only gave a short remark. I said what I needed to say. He told them now it's up to the American people. That soundbite became almost as powerful as his original reply, calm, understated, but filled with finality. By midnight, late-night comedians were already preparing their opening monologues on The Daily Show. Clips of Trump yelling "Get out" were spliced next to clips of Obama calmly sipping water on Saturday. Night Live writers scrambled to build a cold open around the confrontation. Even Jimmy Fallon previewed it in his opening, joking, "It's the first time in history a room full of politicians actually wanted a speech to keep going, but for ordinary Americans the moment felt less like comedy and more like a window into something raw and true." People debated it in bars and grocery store aisles, on buses. The country had been given a rare moment where the mask slipped, where the power dynamics were laid bare for everyone to see, and for many it wasn't just about politics anymore, it was about character. A school teacher in Kansas told a local reporter, "I tell my kids every day how you handle anger says more about you than what you say." In anger tonight, Obama showed patience. Trump showed the opposite. A retired factory worker in Ohio said, "I voted Republican my whole life, but I'll tell you this, Obama looked like a leader tonight. Trump looked like a man out of control." The ripple spread further across cable shows, across talk radio, across Facebook comment threads. Clips were replayed in airports, in gyms, in hotel lobbies. The confrontation wasn't just news, it was already becoming folklore. By dawn the next day, newspapers across the country carried front-page headlines. The Washington Post, "Obama's words shake White House." The Boston Globe, "Decency versus anger, a night America won't forget." Even international outlets weighed in. The BBC called it an extraordinary moment in modern American politics. Le Monde in Paris described Obama's reply as calm thunder. Trump fired back on Twitter early in the morning, typing in all caps, "Obama was disrespectful. Fake news won't tell the truth. This was a setup." But the damage was already done. Screens across America weren't showing his tweets, they were replaying Obama's calm voice again and again. History will remember who told the truth and who tried to silence it. But if the media storm was powerful, what mattered most was how ordinary Americans processed the moment in classrooms and factories and small-town diners and big city offices, because that's where the real judgment was about to take shape. By sunrise, the clash at the White House wasn't just political theater, it had become part of the national conversation in coffee shops, classrooms, Union halls and community centers, people weren't only repeating Obama's words, they were dissecting them, applying them to their own lives, turning a single sentence into a mirror. For the state of the country in Cleveland, a morning radio show opened its lines to callers. The first caller, a grandmother who had lived through the civil rights era, said quietly, "I've seen presidents shout before. I've seen leaders lose their cool, but what I saw last night was a man keeping his dignity." While another man tried to strip him of it, "That spoke to me more than any policy ever could." Her voice cracked with emotion, and the host let the silence hang before moving on. In Phoenix, a group of factory workers gathered around the break room TV, replaying the clip. One man shook his head and muttered, "I don't even like Obama, never did, but Trump screaming like that, he looked weak." Obama looked like the president, even though he's not. His coworker sipped coffee and replied, "That's the thing, being loud don't make you strong, it just makes you loud." Meanwhile, in high schools across the country, teachers found themselves fielding questions from students who had watched the confrontation on TikTok or Twitter. In a classroom in Portland, a young girl raised her hand and asked her civics teacher, "Why did the president get so angry if the other guy was just talking?" The teacher paused, smiled faintly, and said, "Because sometimes words reveal more than we want them to, and sometimes the truth makes people defensive." The moment also made its way into pulpits. In Dallas, a pastor told his congregation, "Decency is not weakness, it is strength." And last night we were reminded of that truth. Congregants murmured their agreement, some nodding, some tearing up across college campuses. Debates raged in a lecture hall at the University of Michigan. Students packed into a political science class, arguing over whether Obama's reply was a turning point or just another flash in the media cycle. A professor scribbled, "Obama's quote on the board, history will remember who told the truth and who tried to silence it," and told the students, "This isn't just rhetoric, this is a case study in leadership under pressure." But not everyone was celebrating. In rural Iowa, a group of farmers gathered at a diner counter, many loyal Trump supporters, and fumed about the coverage the media is making. "Obama looked like a saint," one man grumbled. "They're just looking for ways to tear Trump down." His friend pushed back gently, "I get that, but you gotta admit, Obama handled himself better. That's just the truth, no matter who you vote for." The first man stirred his coffee, unwilling to answer. In small-town libraries, barbershops, laundromats, everywhere people gathered. The confrontation sparked conversations. Some were heated, others thoughtful, but all carried the same undercurrent: what does leadership look like, and who embodied it? That night, even internationally ordinary people chimed in. A Canadian truck driver interviewed on the radio said, "We've got our own politics up here, but watching Obama stand his ground like that, it made me remember that real leadership doesn't need to shout." And London cafe patrons debated the symbolism of the moment, some marveling at Obama's poise, others shaking their heads at Trump's volatility. Back in the United States, polling firms wasted no time. Overnight surveys revealed that while opinions about Trump and Obama remained polarized, the clash had shifted perception among independents. A slim majority said Obama's words represented leadership, while Trump's outburst was described as anger or loss of control for everyday people. Though the polls didn't matter, what mattered was how it made them feel. For many, it rekindled a question that had been simmering for years: do words still carry weight in politics, or had shouting matches and scandals drowned out the power of a measured response? In a grocery store in Milwaukee, two mothers chatted in the checkout line. One said, "I want my kids to see leaders who stay calm under pressure. Last night, they saw that in Obama. That's what I'll tell them." The other mother sighed, "I just wish the president we've got now could do the same, say even late night." Conversations carried the weight of the moment. In a living room in San Diego, a teenage boy told his father, "I didn't know politics could be like that. It felt like watching a movie." His father replied, "That wasn't a movie, that was real, and it showed us more about both men than any speech or ad ever could." By the end of the week, the confrontation had worked its way into sermons, debates, op-eds, school lessons, and dinner table conversations. Obama's reply wasn't just a line anymore. It had become a reference point, a shorthand for dignity in the face of rage. But inside Washington, where politics is as much about strategy as sentiment, the battle wasn't over. Trump and his allies were already plotting to reclaim the narrative, setting the stage for a bruising war of words that would push this clash even deeper into the public consciousness. In Washington, silence never lasts. By the following morning, the confrontation between Trump and Obama had become the only story that mattered. The White House communications team scrambled into action, holding emergency meetings before sunrise. Advisors argued over strategy. Should they ignore the moment, spin it as an act of disrespect from Obama, or double down on Trump's anger as strength? Trump himself made the decision by 6 a.m. He was already on Twitter. Obama came to disrespect the presidency. Total disgrace. Fake media won't show it, he typed in all caps. Within minutes, thousands of replies flooded in, some supportive, many mocking, others replaying the very clip that contradicted his spin. Cable news networks divided quickly. Fox News featured panels blasting Obama for grandstanding and hijacking the event. One pundit claimed he came to provoke the president, and he succeeded. That's not leadership, it's theater. Meanwhile, CNN and MSNBC played the clip on a loop, framing Obama's calm as statesmanship, a masterclass in composure. One analyst called it the country was split, but the narrative battlefield leaned heavily in Obama's favor. His words were simple, repeatable, and resonant. Trump's defense relied on shouting fake news, while Obama's reply, history will remember who told the truth, and who tried to silence it, was already etched into the public's mind behind the scenes. Republican strategists worried. A congressman from Florida admitted anonymously to a reporter, "We can't defend that clip, it's brutal, you can't outspin calm." Dignity still, public loyalty demanded they try. Party figures appeared on talk shows insisting Obama had been disrespectful, but the rehearsed lines sounded thin next to the raw footage. Meanwhile, Democrats wasted no time capitalizing on the moment. Overnight, fundraising emails went out with subject lines like "Decency is strength" and "Stand with Obama." Donations surged as grassroots organizers shared the clip as a rallying cry, and volunteers began wearing t-shirts with Obama's quote, which sold out within hours. Obama himself stayed largely silent, offering no interviews or social media posts, and that restraint only amplified his impact. The less he said, the more powerful his original words seemed. Analysts compared it to the rope-a-dope of modern politics, letting an opponent exhaust himself while a single strike continues to echo. Trump, by contrast, could not stay silent. At a rally in Toledo just 2 days later, he ranted for nearly 15 minutes, shouting that Obama had disrespected him, insisting the fake news was twisting the story. His supporters cheered, but their energy felt subdued. Clips of his rant spread online, but next to Obama's calm composure, Trump appeared unbalanced, almost desperate. Talk radio lit up with debate. In Dallas, one caller said he disliked both men, but admitted Obama looked like a man in control while Trump looked like a man losing it. In Florida, another insisted Obama had planned the moment to humiliate Trump on his own turf. Both views found audiences, but the undeniable reality was in the footage itself. Late-night hosts fanned the flames. Stephen Colbert quipped that Obama taught a seminar while Trump failed the class. Memes spread across social media contrasting Trump's red face with Obama calmly sipping water. The harder Trump tried to fight back, the deeper the contrast became. In Washington, think tanks and scholars debated the long-term impact. A Georgetown historian remarked that moments like this become shorthand in American memory. Kennedy had "ask not." Reagan had "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." And Obama may have just written his post-presidency legacy with one sentence. Polls soon showed independents souring on Trump's temperament. When voters were asked who looked more presidential, 62% chose Obama, even though he no longer held the office. That number rattled the White House. At the same time, grassroots movements seized the moment. College students launched a campaign called Dignity First, hosting rallies where they played the clip on giant screens. Civil rights leaders tied Obama's words to broader struggles for justice, reminding Americans that calm courage often defeats loud intimidation. Trump's team scrambled to respond, even releasing edited videos cutting Obama's remarks short to make them sound harsher, but fact-checkers debunked them instantly. The unedited footage spread faster than anything the White House could release. International voices joined in. A German chancellor spokesperson praised Obama's composure as proof that dignity speaks louder than anger. Meanwhile, Russian state media framed the clash as proof of chaos and division in America. Back home, families argued over dinner. Tables, offices debated over coffee, and pastors quoted Obama in Sunday sermons. The moment wasn't confined to elites. It was everywhere. And while Trump fought to reclaim control, each attempt only reinforced the image of Obama seizing the high ground with a single sentence. Asterisk. The true weight of the confrontation wasn't in headlines or polls, but in the lasting impression it left on the American people. A week later, while the news cycle had moved on, the clip remained alive in memory. In barbershops, grocery stores, classrooms, and union halls, people replayed Obama's calm words not just because they belonged to him, but because they felt bigger than him. In Pittsburgh, a retired steelworker played the clip at a community meeting. After the room fell silent, he said, "That's not just about presidents. That's about all of us." Around the table, heads nodded. In San Francisco, a mother told her teenage son that people cheered because they were tired of shouting. When the boy asked, "So you don't have to yell to be strong?" she smiled and said, "That's right, sometimes strength whispers." Asterisk even. In Washington, where cynicism runs deep, staffers admitted privately that they were moved. A junior aide confessed it reminded him why he went into public service, because calm words had defeated anger. The clash became more than a viral moment. It turned into a parable used by parents, teachers, and pastors to remind people of the contrast between dignity and rage, patience and temper, truth and denial. Trump kept shouting at rallies, claiming Obama had disrespected him, and while his supporters cheered, the image outside those arenas was very different. For millions, Trump's shouting came to symbolize chaos while Obama's composure stood for steadiness. Once an image sticks, it rarely fades. Asterisk. Obama himself never added much more. He let the moment breathe. His silence afterward was part of the lesson. He didn't need to explain, the words had already done the work. That restraint magnified the contrast. Months later, polls unexpectedly ranked Obama among the most trusted figures to handle a crisis. Focus groups repeatedly brought up the East Room exchange, describing him as the adult in the room. Beyond politics, the moral seeped into daily life. A father in Kansas told his kids during an argument, "Remember what Obama said, history remembers the truth, not the shouting." A teacher in Oregon put the quote on our classroom wall as a reminder to use words wisely. Asterisk. The real legacy of that night wasn't about one man defeating another. It was a reminder that power doesn't always roar, and respect isn't demanded with fists or threats. It's earned through composure, patience, and courage. The confrontation became a parable of two men, one shouting, one standing steady, and America quietly decided which version of leadership it longed for. When future generations replay the clip, they won't just see a feud. They'll see a choice between fear and calm, noise and meaning, pride and principle. History doesn't just remember what was said, it remembers how it was said. And as the lights faded in the East Room, the message lingered. Strength is not in shouting, it's in standing tall. Dignity doesn't make you weak, it makes you unforgettable. Obama's reply will echo for decades, not because it embarrassed Trump, but because it reminded America of a truth it had almost forgotten. Leadership is character in motion, and when truth stands against fury, truth wins. Asterisk.